Nation, what's up, dudes? Stoked to be with you guys for another Monday video launch. Monday, Maker's Monday. That's what we're calling it today. I'm sitting here today with a very inappropriate amount of Maker's Mark. 4 specific editions, and the point of today's video is to decide which one is the best. Maker's Mark has been getting more props than usual of late. I mean, going back just a few years, there wasn't a lot to be excited about with Maker's Mark. I've always been a fan, I've always enjoyed the product, but they didn't have a limited release, really. You know, they started doing their single barrels, their private select picks, the messing around with wood staves in the barrel, and that was fine, you know. That created some interesting products. But they've recently started releasing their own versions of those wood stave experiments as national limited releases, which we have here in front of us. And they've been generally pretty good. Going back to this guy here, the SE4 PR5, pretty good. RC6 was before that. That one got mixed, let's say mixed reviews. SE4 PR5 was generally lauded, like, hey, this is pretty good. And then it's just kept going up, like the reputation of the Maker's limited releases going up. Anyway, we're going to do a taste off today, get into that. Before we do, I'm just going to remind you guys, like, comment, and subscribe. The deal, you know, the usual YouTube thing, that's what you need to do. I mean, I ask very little. That's actually not true, but I'm going to, again, ask you for it today. Like, comment, and subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram at DrewPWhiskey. You can get supplemental, additional, more free content there for you, for your perusing. I'll go live on there sometimes, post some dank photos, keep it real. Keep it generally fun and whiskey-centric. I do post some golf sometimes on there, though, just fair warning. One other point of business before we get into this Maker's taste-off here, and that is that we have another barrel pick launching very soon. We have an 8-year-old MGP pick. Yes, you heard me right. 8 years old MGP bourbon, 21% rye bourbon from Dancing Goat Distillery. Currently headed to Sealbox, where we will make it available to our Patreon supporters first. There's 144 bottles of this. It's going to launch in the next probably 10 days. You're not going to want to miss it. It's fantastic. And the value, redonk. I mean, I'm not even going to tell you how much it costs, because it's almost embarrassing how good of a deal it is. Patreon.com/entryproofpodcast. That's where you can support the show. And if you do that, you will then get access to bottles. Now, this is going to be the first barrel release where we open it up to the higher supporting tiers of Patreon first, and then the lower tiers second, so on and so forth. Eventually our live stream squad, I don't know if it'll make it past that. Pretty sure this one's going to sell out fast. But tonight we are not talking about MGP. We're talking about these Maker's releases, you know. And I've taken some notes in advance to help me. I'm going to taste them again in brief, but I don't want this to be an 80-minute video. So we're going to run down these, and the goal is to rank them from best to worst, or worst to best, whatever you like. And we're going to go in order that they were released-ish, mostly. And we'll start with this SE4 PR5, which I'm down to the nubbins of my bottle here. I'm going to go ahead and pour all these at once, actually, before we start tasting. We'll go SE4, FAE-01, Maker's 46 Cask Strength, and then FAE-02. So I've tasted through these before. I tasted through them like last Friday night, and then my wife got sick. I was up super late. Not a great night, but earlier in the night I was watching the third Psych movie and drinking through these, and enjoyed it. Alright, so here we go. Starting with SE4 PR5. On the nose, this one is just generally a little medicinal. You get a little bit of cough syrup. But then it has some sweetness and some interesting wood notes. Not like sweet oak. Not what you think of when you think of American whiskey oak. A little bit spicier. It's kind of thin and hot. It does have plenty of wood in it, which is nice. But then it finishes bitter, not great. Like it finishes kind of aspiriny. So it's got some sweetness, like a suggestion of maple syrup in there. Plenty of interesting wood, but then medicinal, like I said, cough syrupy kind of vibe, and then like aspirin pill bitterness on the finish. I like it. Like, I'm judging it fairly hard off my notes here. And as I taste it right now, because it's in good company. And so the flaws are going to stick out with just a little bit more clarity. All right, next up we're going to FAE-01. Before we get into this, the SE4 PR5, that was a 2020 release. FAE-01 was an early 2021 release. FAE-02 was later 2021. The Maker's 46 cask, that actually has been distillery only, but recently, in the last year, I think, I got it earlier this year, but I'm pretty sure it was released actually in 2020, but we're going to taste it, or just to break up FAE-01 and FAE-02. But all of these within the last couple of years. FAE-01 is a little more refined than the SE4. Its sweetness is not as pronounced, and its oakiness is not as pronounced, but it also doesn't have the medicinal bitter qualities that SE4 PR5 had. It's very caramely. It's kind of classic Makers, actually. Not too dissimilar from a really solid batch of the Maker's Cask Strength, standard Maker's cask. It's a little fruity too, like I got some Twizzler action. Like red Twizzlers with a nutmeggy kind of spiciness. It's light, but it's not thin and off-putting like the SE4 PR5 was. Then we get to Maker's 46 cask, which when I opened this one, to be fair, I was like, ah, man, kind of a letdown based on everything. I just like splashed bourbon in my eye. Oh my gosh. Oh. Ow. Okay. Well, hopefully I don't blind myself, but that was uncomfortable. Okay, Maker's 46 cask. I did not like it straight out of the bottle. I don't know what I had that day. When I came back to it the other night, I was very, very, very pleasantly surprised. It was really sweet and really viscous. And it had a really interesting kind of mouthfeel quality. Not too dissimilar from a really, was as much of an aged tequila as I've ever had. Like, it's got some kind of agave suggestions, but really, really sweet. And it's only like, again, the tiniest suggestion of tequila. It's pretty spicy, but not bitter. I mean, like pumpkin spice kind of vibes, not like black pepper where you get kind of bitterness on the finish. The nose is really rich, and you get this kind of vanilla creaminess, like a really nice wheated bourbon. I want just a touch more oakiness from it. You know, I like oak. I like a good, robust, oaky bourbon. And this is not, it's not pushing the oak forward as much as I'd like from a limited release. That said, it's really, really good. And I think, it handily beats SE4 PR5, and it's a good leg up as well on FAE-01. Then we get to the fourth one tonight, which, to be fair, I had picked one of these as a winner. I had picked one as a winner the other night, but I'm going to taste them off side by side again tonight in effort to either affirm my decision that I had made on Friday or maybe turn it over, go with something else. I won't tell you what I picked just yet, but FAE-02, here we go. FAE-02 struck me both on the nose and on the palate as the one putting forward the most traditional oak kind of flavors. You get a touch of smoke on the nose. The sweetness isn't as pronounced as some of these other whiskeys. but it's just a good blend of flavors, kind of like a floral honey, a spicy oak, touch of smoke, maybe some brown sugar, and all that gets like wrapped up in the super creamy package. The mouthfeel on this one is really nice, really oily, and feels like the oldest bourbon in this lot. Now, granted, we have no idea how old these are. Makers traditionally, I think it's like 6 to 8 years old. The barrels get cycled, they get moved around. These all have special finishes on them, so we actually have no idea how old the distillate is. But this one, if you're judging based off how other distilleries age, this one seems like the oldest. That said, the sweetness is toned down, I think, compared to the Maker's 46. But these two, the Maker's 46 Cask Strength and FAE-02, very easily stand out from the SE4 PR5, this one, and the FAE-01, which I really liked FAE-01. The more I go back to the SE4 PR5, I'm not going to be really sad to see this bottle go. So now let's fight about these two. And we'll break these down. The Maker's 46 is just that it's their classic Maker's 46, but released at Cask Strength. What is Stave Profile 46? I actually don't remember. It's like French oak and mocha staves and some other stuff. Makers has worked a lot with independent stave company to develop these sort of custom flavoring staves that they use in the Maker's 46 profile. I just don't remember what all they are. Meanwhile, FAE-02 is 10 virgin toasted French oak staves, so all toasted French oak, inserted into what is otherwise an oak barrel. And this, they say this delivers a texture-forward expression. I would agree with that. Full-bodied, I'll agree with that, with notes of toasted oak and rich, creamy finish. So I agree with a lot of what they say on the flavor profile here. But which one's better? Which one suits my fancy more? If you could pick one, if you had to pick one, which one should you go for? And as far as I'm concerned, which one of these is the best Makers I've ever tasted? Because I haven't tasted Makers better than these. So on my table right now is one of the best Makers ever. Now I'm sure there are some other really unique, super unicorny type Makers releases that I just don't have access to that could beat these out for best Makers ever. But let's just imagine for a moment those don't exist. And one of these is the best Makers ever. Which one? Let's go back to FAE-02. Killer nose. Really nice. I like that oaky presence, as I mentioned. This one feels like on the nose, like it carries itself like a really high-end whiskey. It's not harsh. It's really well balanced with a nice blend of sweetness, spiciness, and oak. Exactly what I would expect from a really great wheated bourbon. And it delivers on the palate. It's not one of those whiskeys you taste and you're like, whoa, oh my gosh, that is so good. It's just not that intense, and no Maker's product is. Like normally when I taste a bourbon that blows me away, it's because it fills my mouth with all sort of richness and creaminess. The sweet oak is like a mixture of brown sugar and caramelized caramel, like kind of burnt caramel. And then really interesting spice or floral or fruit notes. Whereas the Makers, any Makers I've had is just not that intense. Whereas this one, though, is exceptionally well balanced. It is dark chocolatey and creamy. A little like tres leche, kind of caramel milky vibes. Like a really rich honey. If it's fruity, it's going to be in like dried figs or sugar plums. Nothing terribly juicy. We're really in the baking sweetener kind of category here. Coming back to the Maker's 46 cask now. Let's give it a little rinse. This does hit with more intensity against the FAE-01. Like it hits me big and bold with, hey, here's a lot of brown sugar. You're going to like that. Put it all over your tongue. And that vanilla cream is nice as well. It is hotter on the finish. This one, the finish is great, but it doesn't hit you with sort of back end heat that you have to overcome. Yeah, I like the front of this one better, but I don't like the finish as much as I like the finish on the FAE-02. This is really tough. They're super close. And I had a really hard time picking one on Friday night, and I'm having a really hard time affirming one over the other tonight. A couple more sips here as we try and lock this thing down. Maker's 46 is going to be a touch spicier. I do get a touch of black pepper here. It's not heavy. It's not very pronounced, but it's black pepper with cloves and then pumpkin spice, like all kinds of pumpkin spice. By pumpkin spice, I mean it's sweet. It's very nutmeggy with some cinnamon, a touch of cinnamon in there, not like red hots, but more on the sweeter end of these classic fall spices. The sweetness up front really draws you in, and that black pepper kind of finish I'm getting is kind of harkens back to that tequila kind of mouthfeel that I was getting, which is unique. And it's just ever so slight, so please don't get me wrong. This doesn't taste like tequila. No, it doesn't. There's just a suggestion of something. But really good. Bold, kind of brash. A little brash, but a great, bold, wheated bourbon. As I come back to the FAE-02, though, I gotta give it to it. I do think that this is just a better quality product overall. It is less intense than the Maker's 46, but I do think it's better balanced, and I think I'm going to reach for this one more, or maybe less, because I think it's so good. It's crushable, though, dangerous, easy to drink because it's so well balanced, but I like that suggestion of age that shows up here. Nose is really fantastic, and then the mouthfeel, too. The creamy mouthfeel with a gloriously sweet finish that's not oppressive on my tongue. Yep, that's what we're rolling with. Squad, thank you for watching that. Hope you enjoyed it. Makers, I'm pleased with Makers. I'm excited about what Makers is doing. I would love to see them release a 12-year-old Cask Strength product. I'd lose my mind. I'd be so jacked for that. You should too. In the meantime, though, I'll continue to take products like FAE-02 or the Maker's 46 Cask or even FAE-01. Great wheated bourbons for like $60, $65 that are reasonably available. There's a lot to like there as far as I'm concerned. All right, y'all.